Welcome back. In the last session we finished this much of our picture, and I wanted to pause and take a break before we started getting into other pieces of the picture. At this point I'm going to show you like one more piece of making buildings on this side, and then I'm going to just let you kind of fill in whatever you want into this picture. Alright, so the last part of this is taking now that we've kind of gone over some just like basic skills of where the orthogonals should be, how things recede into the background and stay within the size of the orthogonals. We're gonna go into making the houses, or like boxes that can represent a house. So again, just like we did on this assignment, we're going to treat these boxes now, I mean obviously not this one that's flying up in the air, but this one down here, we're going to treat it like a building. Alright, and we're going to show you a couple different ways that we can make a building. So over on this side, what you want to do is we're going to start with one large building in the foreground. Alright, so I'm going to take a vertical line from my one orthogonal up here, and I'm going to use the bottom line of the clouds, and I'm going to take actually, you know what, I lied, I'm going to make another orthogonal just above and below these two. So I'm going to make my next orthogonal right here, just so it doesn't line up with my my shadow line, and I'm going to take another orthogonal right here just so it doesn't line up with my clouds, just to kind of keep things separated. We could get into overlapping and all that stuff, but let's just kind of keep it simple. Okay, so now that I've got two new orthogonals in, I'm going to take a vertical line for the edge of a building. Alright, so there's the edge of my building. Then I'm going to take a horizontal line parallel to the bottom of my paper, and a parallel line horizontal to the top of my paper, and then finishing it off, I just right next to the edge here, taking a vertical line at the edge of my paper so that I've got a rectangle. Alright, and this rectangle is going to serve as the front edge, or the front facing edge of our building. Now this building going back into space is going to follow right along the orthogonals. So let's pretend I've got this building here. I'm going to put the end of the building, as it were, there, and then I'm going to draw in the orthogonal here as the bottom edge of the building, and here's the top edge of the building. Okay, now that's like a simple building. And since it's a building and we can't see through it, if we erase this line, that will give us a little bit more believable building look there. Okay, and now if we want to start some more buildings, let's pretend that I want to have another building right here. I'm going to start a horizontal line for my building, and there's going to be a space that's going in between these two buildings here, you see. Alright, and that's the bottom of my building. Now I'm going to make this kind of a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to do a vertical line, horizontal line, and this is like maybe the first story or first and second story of my building. Then I'm going to build another rectangle on top of that. And another rectangle on top of that. And now this is just being, in one sense, this is super simplistic. I'm just using rectangles. You could obviously get way more complicated than this, using different shapes, using different sizes and whatnot of your buildings. But the trick here is, for the beginning of this project, we want to make sure that we're kind of following the rules. Before we start breaking the rules, we want to make sure that we're following them. One thing that I always say, breaking the rules is great, but if you don't know the rules in the first place, it's hard to break them the right way. All right, so there's, let's pretend, the front of my building. That's the one that's facing towards us. This is facing towards us. Now what I would do is I'd put in these corners, and I would put them all in so that they are vanishing towards the vanishing point, right along an orthogonal that would be there if we were drawing the dotted lines in, but we're going to draw them in solid. And notice you've got to line it up each time. Takes a little bit of patience, takes a little bit of thoughtfulness, but you really do want to line up correctly each time, or it's not going to look right. Okay. Now there's the edge of my building, and then if I take vertical lines yet again, okay, vertical line, and I just step it in ever so slightly each time. Now I have like a tiered building correctly following the ideas of perspective in. All right. Now let's pretend, I'm going to just finish this piece off. Okay. Now let's pretend you want to start working with a different shape. All right. Oops. Let's pretend I want to start working with a different shape, and I want to take, let's say, like a little farmhouse over on this side. Let's just make, or a little like house rather than a skyscraper or something. Let's just take a rectangle. Here. And put a roof on. Now this is going back to that first skill of finding the center. Okay, we want to make this roof for this farmhouse or whatever it is right in the center. So I'm going to find the center of this rectangle. Now I could measure it with my ruler and say, it's 2 3/4 inches long and whatever, and actually measure it out, but that doesn't work later on. So right now we found that center, the true center of this rectangle is right there. All right, so I'm going to just draw a parallel line up and make it light so I can erase it easily. And then I'm just going to take a point and make it go along the edge. Find that same point and line it up with the corner, and now we've got the center peak of this farmhouse or whatever you want it to be right above this direct center of that building. All right, and that's a really key skill in order to make things directly in the center of something. Now if we continue that concept, let's pretend we want to have this farmhouse going into perspective, just like all the other buildings we're working on. And we're going to draw our orthogonal back here, this direction. And we're going to take this one. Okay, this is the edge of the building, or like the top of the wall for the building is right there. But of course the end of the roof would be right here, right? Okay, and that roof is going to overlap, so we're going to do it like that just to show you both. And here's the top of the roof. Okay, notice how I've overlapped it so it's behind that telephone pole. Now if I take a vertical line to end our house or farmhouse or whatever it is, like so, and I do another parallel line so it's parallel to the front of this house, Okay, there's our like farmhouse. All right, now let's say, and this is where again the diagonal lines to find the center come into play. Let's pretend I want to have a chimney, and I want that chimney to be right in the middle of this house. I could measure it. I could decide that it doesn't matter to have it in the middle of the house, but what I want is, just to teach the skill, I'm going to put this right in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to line up this corner with the top corner of my rectangle. Okay, so there's one diagonal line. Here's the next diagonal line from the top corner of the rectangle to the bottom corner of the rectangle. Okay, and you'll see that the center is right there. All right, that where that X crosses, that is the true center, which is not going to be the same. If I measure this diagonal line, because it's diagonal, the true center is not going to be in the middle. If I had this 2-inch line that I have, here is 1 inch. So I would have gotten off and had my center like right there, which is not in the center. So to find a diagonal shape, this like trapezoid shape here, to find the center of it, you need to use the corner to corner method to find that center point. Now if I draw a parallel line or a vertical line, and I get right up to the top here, all right, that would be in the middle of this line. Sorry, here. That's the middle of that line. Okay, so I've found the middle, and now I can put a parallel line to find the middle here. So that's the true middle of the house in perspective. Whereas if I measure it, it looks like the middle might be around here by measuring. Now I can go back and say, well, now that I've found the middle of my house, all right, I'm going to put in a chimney. And I guess if we have the end of my chimney there, we would have to have the diagonal for it overlap there, and we would have to have the diagonal overlap there, and then this piece would be horizontal in the front, and this piece would be, actually it would be angled the same as the roof, because it would go over the top of the roof. So it would be angled like that. Okay, and so now we have our chimney sitting on this side of, or on the inside of the house, and we've made it so that this piece is right on center. Okay, so those are a few more skills as to how you are putting things together. Now let's say I want a row of windows. Last skill is windows. Let's say I want a row of windows going into space correctly. I'm going to take the top floor here. There's my top floor of windows, and I'm going to, that's like the top of the window, and here's the bottom of a window, right? So that would be the width of the top to the bottom of my window, and then I would just simply draw some vertical lines in here for the edge of a window, and here's maybe the other edge of the window there. Now what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to measure this out. Like if you want an even number of windows or an odd number of windows, you would have to measure it out and divide by half, just like we did over here, to find where the halfway point is on that trapezoid, because that's a trapezoid, and anything else you put on this side is going to be a trapezoid. Likewise, this doesn't matter with perspective, obviously, but if you're looking at the front of this building, you would want to have your windows within the same framework and say, okay, well, there's where my windows should be. If I've got, 3 rows of windows, you'd have to measure out where the half would be, and then put your one window in, and then put those two windows on the other halves. So you have to kind of measure all of that stuff out and get them into the right place. Now, you've got some kind of a picture that looks something like this because you've been following along with me. Now what I would like you to do is I'd like you to add like 2 more buildings, one thing in the sky, and then maybe add the shadow for this house onto here. So notice how we did the shadows here with the telephone poles. I'd like you to add the shadow onto this house, drawing it over to the edge and then measuring how tall this is and reflecting it down. And so that's your challenge for this little playful assignment, is just to figure out how to do the shadow on your own, figure out how to maybe do one more building over here and maybe another building over here and maybe one thing in the sky so it looks like it's the right size. Okay, so those are the things you need to have in your next picture, and I will write those on the board. Okay.